Hello YouTubers, welcome to video number 50 in our AP World History Vocabulary session. This is one where we get to talk about the Inca and the Incan Empire, which basically ran from the 1200s to its height in the 1400s, and then its collapse in the 1500s, so the 16th century with the arrival of the Spaniards and Pizarro. But today we're going to look at some characteristics that defined the Incan Empire. We're going to look at four words. The first one is Cusco, the second one is Mita, the third word is Yanas, and the fourth word is Quipu. And so whether I'm pronouncing all those correctly, we'll see. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Let's start with Cusco. So Cusco, you probably recognize the name Cusco from the movie The Emperor's New Groove, if you are cool enough to have watched that movie. And the emperor was Emperor Cusco, and he famously was in the movie attempting to move a farmer off of his hillside farm in order to build Cuscotopia, a giant water slide park, and was eventually persuaded not to, but only after turning into a llama and being forced out of his imperial kingdom by a witch. So obviously this is not based on fact. This is a work of fiction. But the factual part of it is that the emperor lived at Cusco. The capital city of the empire was Cusco. So that is the definition of Cusco. It was the capital of the Incan Empire. So what? So from Cusco, the emperor was able to exercise extreme control. He was able to form military alliances or defeat other groups and dominated the empire in order to gain control of eventually over 10 million people. And so from this center at Cusco was able to form a pretty amazing empire through control of moving people, forced labor, and control of trade and economic activity within the empire, and massive kind of building projects within the empire. So let's take a look at some of those things. The second word after Cusco is Mita. So Mita is a form of forced labor that all Incan citizens or Incan peoples or people who were dominated by the Inca were required to do. And so it's very much like forced community service. It's not exactly slavery, but if you imagine if our government had, I mean, you all are forced in a way to do 30 hours of community service before you can graduate high school. That's not exactly slavery. We'd be pretty hard pressed to call that slavery to make you go out and do community service. But imagine if we expanded that and you were forced as an American citizen to do 30 hours of community service. And maybe not community service that you get to pick, but what the government sees necessary to put you to work. This would save massive amounts of money that the government would normally be spending on paid labor, and it would basically allow force allegiance to the government by basically calling anybody a criminal who's not doing this. So this control, this Mita, is a way for the Inca to get a lot of work done, and not necessarily collecting it in the form of money, taxes, but it's taxes in the form of labor. So this is really kind of a genius idea because not everybody would have had all the money, but everybody is willing to provide labor. So and in addition, during this forced labor period, which was more than just 30 hours a year, this was more like 2 months out of the year that you would be working for the government. You would have your expenses, your clothing, and your food taken care of, and your housing for the time, especially if it was moving you away from your home. So Mita was a way that the Inca extracted labor from the citizens, and it was a form of tax. Not exactly slavery, but it was highly effective. The next word is Yanas, and Yanas is in a way related to Mita. Yanas were groups of people who served basically the noble classes. They were peasants. I'm taking this from your book. They served as servants, artisans, and workers for the Inca or the nobility. So these were folks who were kind of permanently removed from where they had normally lived and worked for the nobles. This again, the significance of this is showing how important human labor was to the Inca. In fact, this was the 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 idea of wealth was human labor. Um, if I put this in a way that makes kind of a little more sense, which would you rather get from somebody as a gift? Would you want to get a store-bought card that has some corny poem on it that somebody else wrote at Hallmark, or would you want to get this wonderful handmade card that has a personalized poem that somebody wrote just for you? And I guess as Americans, some of us might say, well, I want the fancy Hallmark card, but in reality, I think deep down we want that personalized gift, that handmade thing. Because the idea is it's that somebody took the time and labor and energy to do that for us instead of just going and picking a card off the shelf, or making a gift for somebody rather than buying a gift for somebody. So this to the Inca was extremely important. This idea of human labor as a source of wealth. And so that's kind of what the Incan government saw as the greatest source of wealth was human labor. The last word that we have is Quipu, and it's Quipu, and these were knotted strings which were used for record keeping for numbers. So what? What was the big important thing about this? Well, the Inca did not have, this is unlike a lot of other societies of the time, and definitely unlike a lot of civilizations of the time, they did not have a writing system to write down their words, their language. But they did, which was Quechua, but they did have a very elaborate system of record keeping. And so this Quipu was the way that they would keep records, numerical records of different things that they had to keep track of. And they had to keep track of an awful lot because they stored a lot of food and provided a lot of storehouses for people to have food within the empire. So the Inca were basically a socialist society where the Inca, the leader, who was known as the Inca, was in control of basically everybody's life in a way, and everybody was provided for basically, but needed to work for everyone else. And so the idea of community was very strong within this Inca Empire. So that's it for video number 50. And the Inca, just like the Aztecs, met their demise when the Spaniards, they both met a conquistador. The Aztecs met Hernan Cortez and were eventually slaughtered and killed. And then the Inca met Francisco Pizarro, who was also a Spanish conquistador a little bit later, and and they were basically subjugated and either killed immediately, or a lot of them were killed later by disease, which came over from Europe as well. So happy 50th YouTube video to me, and happy getting your homework done early. It's Saturday, and it's not due till Tuesday. So peace, and don't forget to be awesome.